Hi, Caitlin. Welcome to our workshop today.
Hi, Julio. Thank you so much for coming.
Absolutely. I wanted to give you this opportunity during our Pride season to allow you to welcome folks so we can go ahead and have an amazing hour this afternoon.
Great. Yes. So, welcome everyone, all of my toes from Barefoot. I'm pleased today to introduce Julio Roman. So, Julio has dedicated over 23 years to creating safe spaces and advancing the health, equality, and social justice initiatives of Black, Brown, lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender communities and other marginalized communities affected by HIV and AIDS and its related health, social, and economic disparities. So today, Julio is a founding member and co-founder of two LGBTQIA plus centers in the city of Newark and the author of an Amazon bestseller called Out of Space, Creating Safe Spaces in Unlikely Places. So today, guys, Julio is going to talk to us about creating safe spaces, which is something that we all feel very strongly about. And I just want to say how appreciative I am that he's joined us for Pride Month. And I'll send it on back to you, Julio. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Caitlin, for that introduction. I am truly appreciative of it. I first want to say thank you so much for inviting me to have this afternoon with the Barefoot family, especially during Pride season, when we really have an opportunity now to highlight not what just safe spaces are, but what being inclusive really means. So I was super excited when you reached out to me and provided us the opportunity here at Out. So thank you for this chance. And I can't wait to dig into an hour filled of some great information and some great dialogue to go back and forth. What I like to do before we jump on in is just let our audience members know and our Barefoot family what to expect during our hour-long session today. We're going to start today with a brief journey through the gay liberation movement, just so we can have a little understanding of all of the superstars and change makers who had a big influence on not only creating safe spaces, but making sure that the gay civil rights movement really came to life. And so I'm super excited to share some information on that. And then what's really special to me is the ability to share a story with you called Pulse, creating safe spaces in unlikely places. I'm super excited to share my experiences and creating safe spaces in our community, not just for our community, but also for our teams, our family members, and all those that are in our network. We'll also talk about some design tips for the LGBTQI community, and we'll finish it off with the fingerprint to allyship. This is going to be a great way just to sum up our meeting and to take any questions our audience member has at the Barefoot family. So, to not waste any more time and to jump right on in, welcome to our workshop on inclusivity and marketing. It all started on Saturday, June 28th, 1969, in the early morning hours. Faced with arrest, patrons fought back. Following media coverage of the event in the mainstream press and gay news outlet, thousands protested and clashed with riot police over the next 6 days. The aftermath of the Stonewall riots saw an explosion in gay movement organizations, pride marches, and political activism across the world. The gay liberation movement of the 1970s was part of that explosion. It built on the foundation laid in the 1950s and 60s by gay organizations such as the Matching Society, Janus Society, and the Daughters of Blitz. And it took advantage of the existing political network of Black Power, New Left, anti war, women's liberation, and the youth counterculture. Activists within the gay liberation movement established several national organizations still in existence today that many of you will know. They are the Human Rights Campaign, the National Gay and Lesbian Task Force, the Log Cabin Republicans, and the Lombardi Group. But what exactly was the community fighting for? Where was the anger coming from? During the late 1960s, the LGBT gay liberation movement fought to decriminalize homosexual gay acts. It saw equal treatment, but not just equal treatment alone, equal treatment under the law. They understood that treatment was a contextual idea, and that in order to be truly protected, they needed equal treatment under the law. And they also saw that the dissemination of information regarding gay lifestyles would be unbiased. And so the passion and fire that was coming from individuals like Silva Rivera, Martha P. Johnson, and Dennis DeLeon was always rooted in social injustices and creating a safe space for communities that are often marginalized, pushed to the edges, and made invisible. The great thing I can report as you take this journey with me in knowing our history is that the achievements that were accomplished during that time was the rights to publish gay and lesbian magazines. We had the first unemployment discrimination cases won in federal court. We also had constraints of police harassment removed. We also began to have an open dialogue in the scientific and religious communities around human rights and fair treatment. We became more visible in media, and we also became more organized, not only as community-based organizations, but as social movement groups and grassroots organizations. Most importantly, we began to have mainstream conversations around what it meant to be LGBTQ. Thank you so much for taking this short journey with me on the gay liberation movement. As we move forward in today's presentation, as we get ready for our next talk, please take a moment and enjoy this video as we enter the pulse, safety within our communities.
Hi there.
Who, me?
Yeah, you seem like an average guy.
Well, I love smoothies and drive a Prius, if that's what you mean.
Exactly. Quick question. Have you ever thought how your life might be different if you were gay?
Not really. I guess it would be a little harder. Wait, was that homophobic? Oh God, I'm really sorry.
This is a safe space, Carl.
My name is Mark.
Whatever. You're right, though. Being gay has its challenges, but it hasn't always been like this.
Like the Greeks?
Absolutely. The earliest evidence of gay relationships is from ancient Greece, although that was mostly about older and younger men. Did you know Socrates was in the closet?
I didn't. I also didn't know they had closets back then. When did all the crazy homophobia start?
Homophobia seemed to start in the church during the High Middle Ages.
Whoa.
And in the Renaissance, it got even worse.
What happened?
Well, if you were outed, let's just say it would have been bad. There were still plenty of brave people who revolted. On August 31st, 1512, a group of young aristocrats living in Florence staged what many consider history's first gay rights demonstration. But that didn't stop homophobia from migrating to colonial America. In 1776, being gay in any of the Puritan colonies was not allowed.
Jeez. So when did things start to change for the better?
It wasn't until the 20th century that we started to see progress. Gay bars were popping up in major cities, but were frequently raided by the police because being gay was still illegal in every state except Illinois.
Go Bears.
Exactly. One of these bars was the popular Stonewall Inn in New York City. On the morning of June 28th, 1969, which also happened to be the day of Judy Garland's funeral, the patrons of the Stonewall Inn decided they weren't going to take it.
Hell yeah.
A Black transgender woman named Marsha P. Johnson is credited with leading the uprising that started the modern gay rights movement and putting the T in LGBT. Now, every November, the T's and their supporters recognize Transgender Awareness Week.
This is great. It seems like things were going pretty well.
For a while.
A while? What happened next?
Well, in the early 80s, the world was hit by the AIDS epidemic, and the gay community was hit hardest. AIDS became known as a gay disease. In fact, it was originally called GRID, which means gay-related immune deficiency.
No way.
It's true. Many people think that the government didn't act quickly enough because it was considered a gay disease. So the LGBTQ community had to fight it themselves.
So how did they fight it?
They got organized. Activist groups like ACT UP, the Gay Men's Health Crisis, Lesbian AIDS Project, and the Names Project emerged and refused to be ignored. This newly empowered gay community had one goal.
What was that?
To come out. They thought the problem with homophobia was that people didn't know other people who were gay. And if more people came out, they would be seen for who they are and not just as a stereotype. Convincing people to come out was still a tough task, but things got easier in 1997 when Ellen appeared on the cover of Time magazine and told the world, "Yep, I'm gay." After that, more and more gay people started appearing in TV and movies, helping millions feel more confident to love who they want.
Wow, what a journey. I'm kind of digging myself as a gay person.
Slow down. We're not done just yet.
But we've come so far. Can we just celebrate for a minute?
No time for that, Carl. We still have a lot of laws to change.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
Being gay was more accepted, but there were still a lot of rights that gay people didn't have. However, they did have something they didn't have before.
What?
Allies. Yeah, in 2003, Massachusetts became the first state to legalize marriage equality. And 12 years later, it was legal in all 50 states, much in thanks to a majority of Americans who supported it. So as a gay person living in 2019, how would you feel?
Pretty happy I live in the present, grateful for all the heroes who fought before me, and hopeful for the future.
I'm glad, because the fight for equality is still going. It takes a village, and we're going to need your help.
Hi, everyone. So welcome back. I hope you enjoyed the recap of knowing the LGBT history and its importance for your LGBTQ members and if you're an ally. So today I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean to be inclusive and what does it mean to create a safe space so that your team members, your community members, and those that are in your social network feel inclusive enough to be their authentic, unapologetic self. You know, as we move along in the world and we see what's taking place on the news and we're looking at the rights of people being taken away, and as we see the conflict and the intensity of the moment, it really is a question that I want us to think about when it comes to what happens when our safe spaces are violated, right? What happens when the people who represent safety are no longer present? What happens to us as an individual? What happens to us as a team? And also what happens to us as a community? Growing up, it was hard to find safe spaces, but I managed to find safe people. I learned that unless we feel safe to blossom into our true selves, unless we can express who we are without fear and without intimidation, we can never fulfill that which we are called and destined to do in the world. Finding my safe space allowed me to understand and accept that it was okay to be gay, it was okay to be feminine, Boricua, people of Puerto Rican descent, and draped in all my brown skin. It was okay that I stuttered when I got nervous or excited. It was okay that I let my guard down and be open to others. And it was also okay to admire other gay men and other LGBTQ people I witnessed socialize and carry on in their own settings. Witnessing how they cared for one another and looked out for one another made me feel proud. It allowed me to feel my community's love as something tangible and real for the first time. But what happens when our safe spaces are violated? What happens when the people we love, especially those who represent safety, are taken from us? What happens to our spirits when we can't find safety, answers, or support, and we feel hopeless and in despair? How do we, as a team and as a community, deal with what we are witnessing? And where do we start picking up the pieces? These are the questions I grappled with after the Pulse incident in the summer of 2016. It was Latino night at 2 a.m. when a lone gunman, armed with hatred, evil intent, a 6-saw MCX semi-automatic rifle, and a 9mm Glock 17 semi-automatic pistol, murdered 49 of my community members. He made it his goal for all 320 people in attendance to experience terror like no other. I remember that night freezing in disbelief and horror as I watched what was happening in Orlando on the news. My heartbeat became a drum, pounding louder and louder in my head. I felt as if my chest was going to cave in. And the first thing that flashed through my mind was seeing the Columbine tragedy on TV when I was just 12 years old. That had been the first time I had ever seen what a shooting looked like. It was the first time I had ever seen such terror on the faces of innocent people. And it was the first time that I had ever seen blood flowing from lifeless bodies. Pulse, however, cut me in a different way. Just the year before, I had attended the Pulse nightclub myself. Like those at Pulse dancing during the fateful incident, I was dancing away on a darkened and packed dance floor to the high beats of reggaeton with my best friend, Louis, whom we lovingly called Speedy. The strobe lights offered only quick glimpses of recognition and bathed the faces of the community all around me in lights and colors. The room was filled with energy, music, and a celebration of life. Looking back now, the only thing that separated me from the 2016 shooting victim was time and random chance. The night I was at the club, it was the end of our adventurous 2-week-long Miami and Orlando trip, and we chose this place as the climax. After all, Pulse was known all over the country as a must-visit hotspot, especially if you wanted to party with other Latinx and Black LGBTQ community members. Entry was easy like most clubs. No hassle, no dress code, no overbearing security guard, for the most part. No metal detectors, a pat down at most. Just an entry fee in hand, a valid ID, and you were all good to go. After all, the point of these clubs had always been to create an accepting, all-inclusive, safe space, right? To be yourself and to party with your friends and to party with others who may or may not even look like you. Many of the club goers were seeking what we all seek: fun, acceptance, new friendship, and what most of us want at the end of the day, which is the admiration and the respect of our community. At the end of a long, fun night, Speedy and I were exhausted, high from the adrenaline of dancing all night, and so glad that we made the trip. That night, I fell asleep replaying the sounds, colors, faces, and conversations from an experience that I'll never forget. But on June 12th, 2016, the journey of life would be cut short and the safe space taken from many of those who were enjoying a night out at Pulse. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer here, but I'm a big believer that facts are important. Being able to visualize is important, and being able to see our community members in a time of trauma is important to appreciate why safe spaces are needed in our community. "49 people died in the shooting incident. Another 53 were injured, 53 by gunfire and 5 by other causes. Also, according to reports, 38 were pronounced dead at the scene and 11 at local hospitals. Of the 38 victims to die at the scene, 20 died on the stage area and dance floor, 9 in the nightclub's northern bathroom, 4 in the southern bathroom, 3 on the stage, 1 at the front lobby, and 1 on a patio. At least 5 of the victims were killed during the shooter's initial volley of gunfire, but died during the hostage situation in the bathroom, which took law enforcement hours to end after the initial shooting rampage started. This was a tragedy of epic proportion. Immediately following the Pulse incident, LGBT centers and establishments around the country went on full alert. LGBTQ centers on ground floors were now having their windows blackened. Doors were to always remain locked. Buzzers were installed, and in some places, security guards were hired. Those friendly pat-downs I mentioned earlier at bars and clubs now turned into full-on frisk and searches. The idea that a gay club, a safe space, was targeted horrified many in the LGBT community, and there were now a legitimate concern that others would be inspired to attack in the same way. I encountered many LGBTQI individuals who were traumatized by the images of bodies carried out and the stories of the horror endured inside. The number of LGBTQ people seeking counseling increased everywhere. I had been there just a year before, and I could not help but relive the night through the stories I heard on the news of people who experienced the attack. Since it was the end of Latino night, I could not help but be taken back into the chaos that must have ensued in the haze of a good night as the music pounded its last beats. The bathrooms I had used, the stage I had sat on, and the dance floor where I had laughed so hard were now part of horror stories where the bodies of brothers, sisters, daughters, and sons lay. How is this real and why? I questioned God. I remember speaking to some of my straight friends and family who didn't even mention the incident. The lack of concern or recognition truly hurt, not because I wanted sympathy, but because as an advocate, I wanted solidarity. And the lack of acknowledgement of such a tragedy for me was beyond disappointing. And yet, in response to this tragic incident, many others in the local community and country responded with love and an outpouring of support. Blood banks had to turn people away because of the oversupply. Strangers offered to pay for medical or burial costs. Others offered emotional and trauma support. People all over the country gathered to offer any support or assistance that they could. Amazing organizations Birthed from this incident included Orlando United, the One Pulse Foundation, and many others. Faith leaders from all over the state and country preached acceptance, tolerance, and love for those whose lives were lost, and compassion for those who were LGBTQIA. Memorials all over the country have been erected in remembrance of the lives lost at Pulse. Other makeshift memorials included people's names who never made the news but were affected by gun violence just the same. In the end, or may I say, in the new beginning, the LGBT community in Orlando, Florida was able to begin healing from the Pulse incident because they found a safe space in each other. Even with one of their greatest safe spaces devastated and other safe spaces triggering fear, they connected with one another. Their collective trauma bonded them further. Support groups flourished. Vigils sprung up in places special to those who passed on, and celebrations of life were organized. But most importantly, the story of those whose lives were lost were told. One by one, we began to truly understand the hearts and lives behind the faces and names. We began to hear stories of the incredible values they shared with the world. Values of love, kindness, and incredible fortitude. The community told narratives that will help heal the wounds of the community by choosing to focus on the greatness of each individual life rather than the agony, terror, and horror of that night. And even though they lost their loved ones at a safe space, they became safe spaces themselves. They became a stabilizing force at a time when a community was beyond shaken. By owning the narratives of their own stories and understanding that owning their own experience, however brutal, is the ultimate form of empowerment. So let's be inclusive and understand that creating safe spaces where none exist and being a safe space wherever you go will require you to tap into the attributes and skills of the leader. This includes being brave, passionate, and inspirational. It requires you to be confident, convicted in what you say, and able to spark that same belief in others. These are the leadership skills that will take time to develop, but are vital to nurture and possess for yourself, for your team, and for your community. You can inspire and move others to evolve as they become more fully themselves. Thank you so much for allowing me to take space today, this afternoon, as I talk to you about creating safe spaces and being inclusive. Always remember that in order to create a safe space, we must represent a safe space. And so we must determine for ourselves what values we wish to project, what values do we wish to model, and how do we wish to represent a safe space to all that may encounter us. Thank you so much for your time, for your understanding, and for the ability to take this journey with me. I am now so excited to introduce to you Rafael Cuello, Creative Director for the Out Agency. Today, I spoke to you about community, history, community activism, and creating safe spaces. Rafael Cuello will talk to you about content strategies, tips and tricks on how to be inclusive in creating safe spaces for all of those that you may service at the Barefoot Proximity Company. Thank you so much, Barefoot, and let me introduce you to Rafael Cuello.
It would help if I was unmuted, right? Good afternoon, everyone. Happy Pride. I'm so happy to be here with you. For me, it is very important to use my platform to empower, educate, and really unite the community through the arts. So I'm really excited to be here and share some tips that have really elevated my designs with the LGBTQ community here in Newark. So I know we've been talking about this from the beginning. It's about being inclusive and diverse. So whenever people are shown, include LGBTQ plus individuals, family members, friends, and couples that reflect varied ages, races, and genders, etc. Language references to family or relationships should not only include heterosexuals. So as humans, we all want to be seen, or at the very least, we seek representation. And as a gay person myself, and someone who does graphic design, it's important for me to seek normalization when it comes to LGBT, seeing scenes of people that look like me, because LGBTQ people are normal in just like anyone else. So even in designs that are not primarily for LGBTQ communities, be sure to include visuals and language that is inclusive for all. Talk the talk. Do good market research. It is imperative that the LGBTQ perspective is considered and included from the preliminary planning to project execution. And that starts right there within the Barefoot group. If there's a LGBTQ alliance group within the company, be sure to connect with them. If there are folks that are of the LGBTQ experience, include them in those conversations when it comes to planning these projects. You need to have that perspective. That's what's gonna sell the whole view. Now, I'm gonna share with you guys my secret sauce of how to make that research really come to life. For me, it's about peer-led and peer-driven design. So it's all about LGBTQ plus focus groups. Identify community gatekeepers and influencers in your community. Foster relationships with local LGBTQ plus agencies and build community focus groups. So how do you find and identify these community gatekeepers? One, it's for the community buy-in. Hold on 1 second. Here it is. So how do you find these folks? Use social media. I mean, if you're going to find an influencer, they're going to be on Instagram or TikTok or Facebook. So we have to meet them where they're at. Link up with local artists, musicians, and all other creatives. These folks really have their pulse on what's going on in the community, and they really have the verbiage and the connections with other creatives that can really allow you to solidify a community buy-in, right? You don't have to sell a product or whatever it is, the commercial, hard when you have the community buy-in. Someone like an influencer already has established that trust within the community, which is important, and that's what they want to tie back into. So having these focus groups is essential in making your designs really come to life and really be inclusive when it comes to LGBTQ. And have these groups assist you with imagery and verbiage. Listen closely to their conversations. Ask them questions that will, foster that conversation, and use that verbiage and any terminology that they use within the design. Again, it's about inclusivity, not just visually, but also using words. Avoid stereotypes. How do you depict gays and lesbians while avoiding stereotypes or cliches? First way is authentic LGBTQ imagery. Use real gay, lesbian, and non-binary people. So these can be athletes, these can be famous folks, or just people from the community. Same-sex pairings in everyday situations such as at home, driving, shopping, or eating. Now, going back to my comment about normalization, Gay people do the same thing regular people do. So it's important in our marketing and in our design that we see these same-sex pairs doing things that people normally do. Keep it ambiguous. Do not clearly define relationships between people. In your designs, it's not always necessary to define said person as LGBTQ. So you can be inclusive, but also respect that part and let it lead to the audience to kind of figure out what it is that you're trying to say and show them. Avoid cliches. In marketing campaigns, especially transgender people cover a range of identities. Most common in advertising are male to females, who are typically depicted as deceptive, if any pass as women, or frightening if they do not. To more accurately portray transgender people, incorporating transgender people in everyday situations, not as a punchline, but with an acceptance as a twist, and obtaining authenticity by using a real transgender person. Those that live the trans experience, especially Black and Brown people, are not always depicted in a good light. But you as a designer or a marketing person, you have the control of that narrative. And we can shift that. We can shift the story or a commercial where a person of trans experience walks into a coffee shop, say everyone's staring at them like they're a freak, and someone comes up to them and you expecting them to hit them, and instead they extend a hug. You are switching the narrative or what people are already expecting and just creating a twist that is about acceptance, and really putting the trans person in a light that is positive. Now, I wanted to share, before I bring it back, Julio, I wanted to share a final design that was recently created for Newark Pride using this formula. So I just want you to, as I go through the design, really take note of the amazing collaborations that were made, plus the opportunity that we gave to LGBTQ people to showcase their work and have their stories told. So for this particular event, we linked up with Art Front Galleries, which is a local nonprofit organization. This project started off as an LGBTQ call for artists. So we established a solid list of artists that were all of LGBTQ experience. We then tapped into using the artwork from one of these submissions for the official promo, highlighting that LGBTQ person. With all that packaged together, we were then able to secure sponsorship. So we went up to Gilead and to 1180, which are development companies. And we said, look at this beautiful product we have here. We have brought together community members of LGBTQ experience. We have a nonprofit on board. We need a space to show their artwork. And Gilead, would you like to share HIV prevention messaging or any information that you want on HIV treatment? I mean, if you're selling it to them like that, they'd be crazy to say no. So we secured both Gilead and a development company by 1180 to help us showcase the space. So it was a full circle of community buy-in, all based on LGBTQ artists, and just giving them the opportunity to showcase, giving us the opportunity to include them from beginning to end in the project and in the overall event, which is going to lead to other spectacular opportunities. I want to thank you again for being with us this afternoon. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me at Raphael@outagency.org or Julio@outagency.org, and we'll be happy to answer any questions you have. I'm going to return it right back to Julio to talk about allyship. Thank you.
Thank you, Ralph, so much for that great information and for sharing just some tips and some helpful advice that you can really provide us that will allow us to have tools to make our work that much more effective and that much more impactful in the community. So we're almost running up into our hour, and we've had some great conversation. We've been able to share a little bit about the gay liberation movement and the impact it has had across the LGBT community. We've also had a brief mention of the superstars of that era and the gay liberation movement: Sylvia Rivera, Marsha P. Johnson, Dennis DeLeon. But I encourage you, as creators, as marketers, as designers, but most especially as storytellers, to please take your time in learning about the vast amount of LGBT individuals and notables throughout our history that has really had an opportunity to impact not only the way we see life, but also the way we live life. And so please take the opportunity to, as a form of allyship, learn and discover some of the amazing LGBT advocates that we have out in the world today. Today was really special to me because we really focused on the power of storytelling. And I had an ability to share my story, but I also shared it with the hope and the desire that as you work with customers and clients who have their own unique stories, that you choose to focus on what is most empowering by owning and standing on what may not be as empowering. I hope that as creators in the marketing field, you can take your genius and your gifts, and that you can use those gifts to represent the values that you want to represent to the world. See, here at the Out Agency, we are a big believer that safe spaces can no longer just be confined to physical buildings or structures, but they must be found in each of us. We must represent the values that we wish to see. We must represent the values that we want to leave to our children and to our community. And we must really be intentional about how we role model and how we show up in the world. Each of you are amazingly talented in the work that you do. And so I thank you for the work that you've already done, being allies, being partners, and being LGBT artists and creators yourself. I am truly grateful for the spaces you have already carved out. So thank you for that. I also would like to just take this time to say, take advantage of your LGBT resource group. I've worked with some amazing organizations who, in a way to incorporate and bring in the voices of LGBT people, have developed an alliance group or resource group within your organization. Even if you're not LGBT, but you're an ally, if you're in the position to have those conversations, if you're in the position to be able to bring that type of subject up, look and research of the benefits of having an LGBT resource group to be able to inform not only how you do marketing and not only how you serve your clients, but how you serve your local community and how you serve the world. So I am truly thankful for the time that everyone at Barefoot Family has allowed myself and Rafael Cuello to share the lessons of storytelling, safe spaces, and allyship. Thank you for the ability to be able to carve a space for us today. And as we move forward to celebrate Pride, being a vital part to what that Pride looks like. Thank you for your allyship today. Once again, we are truly grateful for your time. And if you have any questions regarding marketing strategies, engaging the LGBT communities, consumers and customers, feel free to reach out at the email that's listed in the chat box, and we'll be more than happy to assist you in any way we can. So I think that wraps it up for me. If we don't have any questions or comments as of now, I'm going to be signing off and wishing everyone a safe and prosperous weekend. And always remember that in order to create a safe space, we must be a safe space ourselves. So what values do you represent, and what values are you willing to share with the world to make it that much safer? Thank you so much for your artistic value. Thank you so much for your creativity. And thank you for the space to share this time with you. Have a great afternoon and happy Pride, everyone.